Okay, well, day one, and it's got 9:30 at night, and I've not managed to find the time to do my quiet time, so I'm actually sitting down to do it now. I'm up in my bedroom, so that's me checking in for day one. Okay guys, well that's me finished my wee Bible study for tonight. It's 5 to 10 at night now on day one. My wee notes from Luke 1, just talk you through what I found interesting. So right at the start, Luke addresses this guy, Theophilus, who I must admit I've never considered before. But from my notes here in the bottom of the Bible, I can see I think he was sort of like Luke's patron, so someone who perhaps had supported Luke financially so he could research and write this book. This whole chapter is really about John and Jesus's conception and their mothers and their parents and their stories. I found it fascinating that John, the baby, reacts to Mary when she goes to see John's mum, Elizabeth, and reacts in the womb to the Holy Spirit. I found that incredible. I suppose it's probably struck a tone with me because Woody has just been born, and the idea of him reacting to the Holy Spirit is just fascinating and perhaps something I'd not considered. So that's what I drew from this chapter that really connected with me. When Zechariah's talking to John, and he's saying, "And you, my little son," I mean, that's how I talk to Woody now. What will you turn out to be? That's really relatable. So the thing that I can apply, people say that the Bible's not relatable, but this new father and the joy that you can see in him talking to his son and imagining what he'll be, and he heard from God about what he's going to be, that he's going to be this person that leads the way for Jesus. Just really connected with me. Another note I've got down here, verse 74, we've been rescued from our enemies so we can serve God without fear. I suppose I'm always quite nervous about sharing my faith, and that was a really hammered home that we don't need to be nervous, that we've been rescued from our enemies. Just struck home with me. What will this child be? You, my little son, I think will be called the prophet of the Most High because you'll prepare the way for the Lord. I really like that moment between a dad and his newborn son. I've also got down, so then I read through the notes at the bottom just to get a bit more context about what was going on. Things that I found interesting there. John's dad was serving in the temple at the time the angel appeared, and the way you got to serve in the temple seems to be a little bit random. You draw lots, which I don't know if you'll know what that is, but it's kind of like picking names at random out of a hat, and it just so happened that Zechariah is serving in the temple, so probably the most sacred moment in his life, maybe his one chance in his life to serve in the temple. And in that moment, an angel comes to him and brings him this news that he's going to be the dad of John the Baptist. And even then, Zechariah still doubts of how can this happen because he's old and his wife's old. And the angel gets cross at him, the angel Gabriel, and punishes him by making him unable to speak. The little notes here also said that Angel Gabriel is only one of two named angels, and angels appear all the time, and everyone's always scared when they appear. But we only know of Angel Gabriel and the angel Michael, which again, just that kind of stuff interests me. I've also written down here, I didn't realise that John, the name John means the Lord has shown favour, and I didn't realise that Jesus means the Lord saves. So those are the notes I wrote down from this. I'd love to hear if you're following along and you've read Luke 1. I'd love to hear what bits spoke out to you. They'll be completely different to me, but that's what leapt off the page for me. I really enjoyed Luke chapter 1, and I prayed at the end and spent some time with God, and it's been a while since I've done a Bible reading and then prayed and gone and spent some time with God, and it's just wonderful how quickly you just fall back into your time with God and feel his presence and feel calmed. It's like going into the welcoming arms of someone who loves you, and there's no judgment about being away, just happy to have you back. So that's me done Luke chapter 1. Looking forward to Luke chapter 2 tomorrow. I'll sign off for now. Bye. Hi guys. So day 2, I didn't do well at getting this in earlier. I'm actually later. It is 11 o'clock on day 2, but I'm sitting down to do my quiet time. Just didn't find an opportunity today to get it done any earlier. So Kirsten is now feeding Woody his last feed of the day before he goes for his big sleep, and I've just got a minute to go and do my quiet time, so I'll read Luke chapter 2. Hi guys, well that's me finished my quiet time for day 2. It is 11:30. It's time for me to go to bed. A few thoughts from my notes this time. This, like Luke 2, is just a traditional Christmas story that we've all heard at school or Sunday school or Nativity, the one you know. But there are a couple of bits and pieces that perhaps I didn't appreciate. A couple of verses that stuck out to me. In chapter 2 verse 7, the direct translation is no lodging available for them, rather than just no room at the inn. And I suppose you could read that in a couple of ways. It could be that it could just be there's no lodging available for anyone, or it could just be particularly there's no lodging available for Joseph and Mary, two young people without connections in this town, and really, I suppose, highlighting the lowly birth of Jesus. Other bits I noted down. 2:19, Mary kept all these things in her heart and thought about them often. I just thought that was perhaps Mary just realising how important Jesus was, but also it sounds like the kind of things that Kirsten does when she's so desperate not to forget anything of Woody when he's so new, and try and remember all these little things he does right now. Could just be a new mum, just being a normal mum. I've also got 2:34, prophecy that Jesus will divide Israel. And that's the man in the temple explaining to Mary that although Jesus is the Messiah and the one they've been waiting for, he will divide Israel, and some will rise and some will fall under his arrival. And I think that would be really tough for a new mum to hear, and you hate to think of your son growing up and dividing Israel. And then I can't believe how quickly we jump ahead to, Jesus is born, and then the next passage he's 12 years old and sneaking off from his parents, and you've got parents were worried. 2:48, parents were worried, why did you do this to us? And I suppose it stuck out. Well, they left him behind, as you do with the caravan. Did they do it to him? But then you get to see that it was Jesus' plan all along to spend time in his father's house, and you can tell at this point that he's something special, that he knows the scriptures, that he's impressing the rabbis, but also that perhaps his parents haven't quite grasped until this point that his loyalties are always going to be to God before his earthly parents. But then he's obedient and he just go back with them. He doesn't stay there in the temple. So just only a few short passages, but interesting exchange between a young man, 12, just before puberty, a very respectful exchange with his parents. We could all learn something from that. I liked how many of our carols that we sing, that we know, so many of the lines come from these passages. And the other thing I wrote down, this is really from the notes at the bottom of the page for me, but that Caesar Augustus is emperor when Jesus is born. So Caesar Augustus is the first Roman emperor. Before that, there was a senate, like kind of like what we have, like a collection of people ruling Rome. But then they gave all the power up to Caesar Augustus, made him an emperor, and then it becomes the Roman Empire, which we all heard about. And then it was the longest time in the Roman Empire of stability. And that's what Jesus is born into. I suppose that's quite telling. Perhaps he needed to be stable for Jesus to come along. Or I'm not sure what the timing is there, but maybe it's covered a bit more later on. I just thought that was interesting, that Jesus was born into the time of most stability in the Roman Empire. That's all I wrote down, so that's me done for tonight. See if I can try and squeeze it in a bit earlier tomorrow. I'm off to bed now. Thanks. Bye. Day 3, Luke 3. It is 10 to 11 at night. Let's crack on. Alright guys, that's day 3 done. It is 11:15. Here are my notes from Luke 3. So Luke likes to start with the historic context. He likes to say, put this in place in the wider world, so we get which Caesar is in charge. Tiberius, who was co-Caesar for a while with his stepdad, I think, something like that. But yeah, and we start by hearing about John being called to action to prepare the way for Jesus. And he does not pull his punches, and he's quite harsh on the Jewish people, and he really stokes up quite a bit of fear to prepare the way with Jesus coming. And all of that troublemaking gets him put in prison by Herod after he's heavily criticised Herod for marrying his brother's wife, which, yeah, I can imagine if we had someone in the streets shouting about one of our leaders doing that. Yeah, I can see how they get put in prison. Now, what I didn't learn, and I learned from my notes, is that John's imprisonment and eventual execution is actually recorded in another book. It's like in the Jewish history books called Antiquities. So I suppose just a bit of corroboration that these events are not just recorded in the Bible. It's hard to justify them being made up when they appear in non-Christian books as well. Same with hearing about which Caesar's in charge. Then we move on to Jesus, where he starts his ministry. He's 30 years old when he starts, and then a large portion of this chapter is just dedicated to that list of names that is Jesus' ancestry, which I think at first, when I first read through it, I was like, oh, it's a bit boring. It's a son of, a son of, a son of, a son of. And, what's the point of including all this? But in a time when writing things down was so expensive, and paper was so expensive, to dedicate this amount of space to the ancestry shows how important it was. We all know that Jesus is the Son of God, but I suppose for those people that are perhaps on the fence, this, detailed ancestry really does break that down for you. Now, my Bible here explains that this is actually not the ancestry of Joseph, but the ancestry of Mary. So Joseph was son of Heli. Well, Heli would have been his mother-in-law, and this breaks it down here. There's a couple of key figures that you may recognise that I enjoyed to see in this list. Boaz, remember Boaz? He was the husband of Ruth, who saved Ruth and from her situation. And Ruth the Moabite, remember that one? And then you've got Seth, who is, if you know your Old Testament Genesis stories, you've got Cain and Abel, who are the sons of Adam and Eve, and then Cain gets jealous, and well, Seth is their little brother. He's their little brother, and he's in Mary's ancestry in this list. So I did like to see those two. There's a couple of others, Nathan, David's son, and you remember King David, who's the really important, someone would come from David's line and re-establish Israel as this great nation and prosperity. Really important for the Jews to mention that Jesus is son of David, but for us that's probably a bit, or a descendant of David, is son of God. We probably tend to forget he's the descendant of David because he's the son of God, which is the important bit. So yeah, those are my notes tonight. I can't believe we moved on from the Christmas story so quickly, because that's the big one, isn't it? But yeah, Jesus is 30 and starting his ministry. So I've looked ahead and can see that tomorrow is the temptation of Jesus, which I loosely remember that story, so I'm looking forward to that one. So yeah, that's me done for tonight. Day 4, Luke 4. 20 to 11. See you after. Hi guys, well that's me finished day 4 of my Bible study. Luke 4, so a few more notes here. I've got, this is directly after Jesus' baptism and he's tempted by the devil. If you've been baptized, you'll definitely been warned by people that you will be tempted. Following a baptism, I know that's what I experienced. You find it really difficult to keep on the right track and keep to this life that you've been reborn into. And so it's really interesting to see that even Jesus was tempted and how he overcame it. And he was out in the wilderness for 40 days, which of reading in the notes of my Bible explains that is in parallel to when Israel was in the wilderness for 40 days, but where Israel were in the wilderness, if you've ever read that section, they constantly complain of being hungry. And Jesus just draws on God's strength and his faith to see it through. There's all sorts of parallels between Israel in the wilderness and Jesus in the wilderness, and where they failed, he succeeded. There was a moment, verse 13, where Satan or the opposer or the accuser, whatever your Bible translates it as, left him until the next opportunity came, which I thought was really ominous. Like, Satan didn't give up tempting him. It wasn't over. He wasn't never to be tempted again. Satan was just prepared to wait until the next opportunity came. And I think that's something we can all relate to. Like, if we overcome a temptation, we know that the tempter hasn't gone away, just waiting for the next opportunity. Something we've always got to be watchful and wary of. And then this is when Jesus first starts his ministry in chapter 4, and it's where he goes back to his hometown and he goes to Capernaum and he starts to perform miracles and cast out demons, and it really is just the start of Jesus. And right at the end of the chapter, he starts to get the impression he's going to start to assemble his team, his team of apostles, his disciples, which I presume is coming up in chapter 5. In fact, I know it's coming up in chapter 5. So yeah, it was a great chapter, and I'm looking forward to tomorrow. Thanks. Bye. Hey guys, it's day 5. It is 24 minutes past 9. It's time for Luke 5. Okay guys, so some thoughts on Luke 5. Excuse my notes, they're a little all over the place on this one because there were some bits I didn't understand, and then I had to go back and read the wee history notes underneath and get a better idea of why wineskins burst. So, what have I got here? So this we've got Jesus where he really starts preaching and ministering to people. He uses the boat like almost like a pulpit. I can imagine that would be really effective. He's out on the lake, everyone's on the shore, everyone settles down and they're not trying to push and get to the front because you can't go any further. All sat listening to him, and sound travels much further over water than it does over land, so I'm sure that would have been an incredible thing to be at. I'd love to have been there for that. We've got this wonderful quote by Simon Peter of 5:8. Oh, please leave me, I'm such a sinful man. I thought that was so relatable that Jesus picked this man to do his work, and yet he doesn't feel worthy at all. I think that's something that any of us who feel like we've been called to work for the Lord, you never feel worthy for it. I've got Simon, James and John demonstrating a total faith and leaving everything behind and going with Jesus. What else did I find interesting in this one? And the wineskins bit. So I had no idea why you couldn't put new wine in old wineskins, but wine doesn't come in skins anymore, it comes in bottles. So this is apparently because as the new wine ferments, it expands and gives off gas, and it would just burst an old wineskin that has perhaps stretched and then dried out. So you can't put new wine in old wineskins. It's got to be new supple wineskins. And the whole bit about people not liking the new wine is just a head nod to the Pharisees not liking Jesus' new message. They want to stick with the old ways. and the whole bit about the clothes. Jesus didn't come to patch up the old ways. He wasn't a band-aid to fix the old ways. He was very much the new way. He was the new wineskin for the new wine. He couldn't fit in the old ways, the old structures of things. So I probably understand that parable a bit better now. Is it a parable? It's more of a metaphor, but yeah, enjoyed that. Enjoyed learning about it and getting my head around how that works. I really appreciated that. So it's definitely built up a bit of Bible knowledge there. Okay, I'll see you tomorrow. Bye-bye. Okay guys, day 6. Luke 6, 10 to 10. I'll see you in a bit. Hey guys, so Luke 6, what did I learn? So straight away you get this image of Jesus and his disciples walking through this field, and they're picking off grain and eating it, and the Pharisees accused him of harvesting, and at first I was like, harvesting? It looks a lot more like stealing than harvesting, but my historical notes at the bottom corrected me, and this was actually allowed, that if you're walking through a stranger's field, you're allowed to take a bit of grain and eat it as you walk through. So yeah, they've just been a bit stringent with the term harvesting, I think. But I did like that this explained, that Jesus is also the Lord over the Sabbath. That it also reminded of why the Sabbath was created. It was for the benefit of God's people, of human beings. So when Jesus heals the man's hand, he's doing good deeds and benefiting the man. It's okay to do good things on the Sabbath. That seems to be the crux of that whole bit. There's loads packed into chapter 6. It is a long chapter, and there's all sorts of good stuff in there. After we get a bit about Jesus healing the hand, we get on to Jesus picking out his 12 apostles. What I thought was really interesting here, it probably was assumed those 12 disciples and then they became 12 apostles, but that's not what happened at all. At daybreak, he called together all of his disciples, and there's no indication of how many there is. Could have been 20, could have been hundreds. There was more than 12, and of this group of people, Jesus picks these faithful 12, and of the 12, 2 of them are called James and 2 of them are called Judas. So you can understand why it's a bit confusing. And then a whole bunch of them have nicknames. So Andrew's Peter's brother, Simon, who Jesus names Peter. Peter means rock. We have this whole bit at the end about building your house on solid rock. A bit of mirroring there. The two Judases, my notes say that one of them is probably called Thaddeus, or known as Thaddeus. And then you've got Judas Iscariot, which is the Judas we all know. Yeah, it's just packed with stuff here. We've got... Oh, before Jesus picks the people, I thought it was really interesting. He prayed all night up on a mountain. So even before, Jesus knew this was going to be a big event, and he had to pick some imperfect people to help him. And to start his church, he'll have known that these people were going to start the church after he ascended to heaven. So he prays all night before this big decision, and I thought that was very telling. It's something that we do now: pray before big decisions and spend more time thinking of what does God want, and ask for God for guidance. And then there's some of the really, the core teachings of Jesus in this next section in chapter 6. You've got that God blesses the poor, he satisfies the hungry, blesses those who are weeping now, love for your enemies, not to judge others, the tree and its fruit, all big themes of Jesus. And then building your house on the rock instead of the sand. It's packed with all the good bits that we know, and that the real cornerstones of our faith, all in chapter 6. So really was packed in this chapter. So that's my notes from here. There were excellent bits in here. The history stuff was great. Another great chapter. And on to Luke 7 tomorrow, which is the last of the week. So I'll see you all back then. Bye. Day 7, 20 to 10, Luke 7. Okay, so that is me finished at Luke 7. A couple of my notes from Luke 7. So we've got another couple of examples, a couple of stories here of Jesus using those people on the fringes of society. So not the wealthy or not the pillars of Jewish society, not the Pharisees, not the educated, but these people on the fringes. So you've got the story of the Roman officer who will have been part of the occupying army. You do get some background on this Roman officer. He's loved by the Jewish community. He's very good to them. And as Jesus gets closer to heal his valued slave, which doesn't ring right in our ears, but if slave ownership was a common part of life back then, I suppose that a good master would be much revered, and you definitely want to be owned by a good master rather than a bad one if you're a slave. If that's all you've got. So you've got Jesus is very impressed by the faith of this Gentile, and stands in stark contrast to the Jews who refuse to believe that he is the Messiah. You've also got the story of Jesus helping this widow whose son has also died, and bringing the son back from the dead. As far as I'm aware, we get no extra history as to what this boy did with this new lease of life, who he grew up to be, what did he do. I'm sure he's got some stories to tell. And then we move on to the bit where John the Baptist is sending his disciples to go and find Jesus and do a bit of a reconnaissance and try and see if he really is the Messiah. The notes in the bottom of my Bible indicate that John is in prison at this point, and he's sending someone to go and check up on Jesus, because at first I thought, why didn't John just go himself? But that makes more sense. Is it that Mary and Elizabeth have grown apart and he isn't, or perhaps he's just never been told about the start of his life when him and Jesus' birth were so intertwined? I don't know. I've also got some notes here on the centurion. I mean, I really like Roman history, so that the idea of this centurion being the Roman officer being put in here just captured my attention. The idea that the Roman army is built on discipline and authority, and this centurion, that's me dropping my phone, and that would be, the centurion would just recognise authority, and he sees it in Jesus, so that's why he says, I don't need to meet you, just say the words and I know my man will be healed. It is incredible faith. But also the moment where Jesus touches the coffin in 7:13, so this is, it would have made a Jewish person unclean under the old rules, and it's just another example where Jesus is demonstrating that the rules have changed, that he is the new wine and he can't fit inside these old rules or these old wineskins. Just another example of Jesus shaking up the system. Jesus is always, throughout this book of Luke, what I've noticed is he's always using people on the fringes of society. So not those that have power in our society, but uses them as examples of good examples. So the lady that washes his feet and cries over his feet and demonstrates her true love and faith for Jesus, and how Jesus uses that woman as an example to Simon as to how he should be acting. Simon, obviously from this text, sees himself as much better than this woman, and Jesus very gently and kindly explains how he is not a patch on this woman. Throughout Jesus' life, you can just see how much he did for women in this time, how much he worked for women's rights and for equal treatment, and which is completely against what was in the Old Testament times. Again, just showing that Jesus is the new way, and the old ways need to be forgotten. So, that's the end of day 7. Yeah, weeks 1 to 7, done 7 days. Must admit, most of my quiet times have been in the evening, which may just be what works with a new schedule, but and it's definitely helped having to hold myself accountable to you guys and record these every time I do it, which has helped. It's helped me remember and helped me not make an excuse not to do it this week, so thank you. Okay guys, so you've just watched my week of Bible study, and now I'd like to introduce you to my wife Kirsten. And she's going to ask me a few questions about how it went.
Okay, first question. Did you find a good routine that'll help you to keep going every day? So a place, a time, how you did it, that kind of thing.
Okay, so I thought I would be able to find a routine in the morning, but that just didn't happen with a newborn baby around. So my routine was in the evening, but it did work, and I did find myself every night over at the kitchen counter there. Which, again, not a place I would have picked at the start, but an easy place to not be distracted by anything. So yeah, I suppose I did.
Nice. And what were you challenged on this week and what you were reading?
What was I challenged on? Okay, I was challenged by the motivation to do it last thing at night. That was difficult when I was feeling a bit sleepy, but it was good to have made the commitment to you guys that kept me doing it. In the Bible, I was challenged by, so we're reading Luke, so it was Jesus' early life, and so much of it takes place when he's about my age, and just to see how much he could achieve and how faithful the people around him were, I was challenged as to put my faith more in God and to trust him.
What's the best thing you've learned this week?
It's the best thing I've learned. Well, I'm such a history nerd that all the bits about the Roman centurions and the old way of doing things in Jewish society, I found all that fascinating. The best thing I've learned is I finally understand the new wine into old wineskins parable, which I had never got my head around before, but now I know.
Nice. And last one, will you keep going next week?
I will keep going next week. I think it'll be more difficult because I don't have you guys checking in on me, but I will keep going. I have really enjoyed it. I want to keep going.
Good. Well done.
All right, guys. Well, that's the end of our bonus YFTV. I hope you enjoyed it, and let us know in the WhatsApp groups or in the comments below just whether you like this sort of thing. Okay, thanks, guys. Bye.